I'm here to talk about public-private partnerships and their role, particularly around achieving better outcomes for young children. I will begin by giving you a very concrete example as I speak to the one that was developed in my own state, with which I have deep experience. I will also discuss the goals and values of public-private partnerships and provide a scan of a few successful models in other states, talk about the factors that seem to affect their success, and then I will close with why it really matters anyway. So 20 years ago, young children and their families had very limited access to high-quality services and programs that were needed to assure that children arrive at school ready to succeed. Since then, every single state has begun to address the critical area and in various ways, but more than 20 states have now created statewide public-private partnerships with a comprehensive early childhood focus. Almost exactly 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to help a governor in North Carolina create a public-private partnership that we call Smart Start. The model includes a publicly funded state-level nonprofit agency that is charged with providing leadership and oversight for a network of local partnerships that are either county or multi-county based that covers every county in North Carolina, and that build community capacity to better understand and meet the needs of young children and their families. These local partnerships bring traditional and non-traditional partners together to identify the needs, build public awareness and engagement, design and implement services, expand and leverage diverse funding, and advocate in their communities. The state partnership is also responsible for raising private funding, for administering both public and private funds to the local communities, for overseeing appropriate fiscal controls, and ensuring the achievement of population-level outcomes for young children and their families. State partnership, in addition, provides technical assistance and training in program and organizational development, in administration, communications, fiscal management, technology, contracts management, and fundraising. So you know why I decided to step down a few years ago. It's a hard job, but there's an amazing result when the state and the communities work together. Smart Start was built upon 3 North Carolina values, which I have a sense from my spending the past 2 days here in Louisiana are very similar to yours. Number 1, we believe in community. Empowering local communities is the key, and establishing measurable community-level outcomes is an approach that works. And community relates to families. We believe that families are the first and most important teachers of their children, and it's this community approach that involves families in getting input, in receiving services, and in decision-making. The second value is an entrepreneurial spirit, using public and private expertise and resources to achieve results. So we used the same approach and the spirit that built our Research Triangle Park as an example. And in early education, we have other public-private partnerships that have gotten results, like the Teach Scholarship Program, the Child Care Health Consultation Model, our rating scales, and many others. And then the third important value is education. North Carolina's valuing education is long held, as is yours. Goes back to the establishment in North Carolina of the first public university. It was also demonstrated in our North Carolina pre-K program that ranks as one of the top in the nation, having met all the quality standard benchmarks that are put forth by NEAR. And it also is demonstrated in our strong community college system that supports our early childhood workforce. And the collective power of our model is dependent upon the strength of the state partnership, state government, and every local partnership, and how we communicate and work together with young children as our focus and school readiness as our goal. Local boards are composed of leaders from public and private organizations and institutions who influence and directly impact resources and services for children and families. The strategy is to align the intentions, the resources, and the services to achieve measurable goals. And these are some categories of people that are included, but I want to underscore that our community people, there's a wide range of participants, including the faith communities. It's an example of how the faith communities can come together with business and families and government and nonprofits to solve the problems, because many times they know the families, they have access to them, and they're good partners in this work. I want to describe some of the outcomes because I hope that will give you a reason to listen and think about this work. We targeted in North Carolina 3 broad areas around young children, and just so you know, our definition of young children is from the time children are born until they start to school, whatever year that is. So our areas are early care and education, family engagement and support, and health, the health of young children. And while we intended that our work would benefit all children, we prioritized our support to the most vulnerable children, the children with the greatest needs. And here are some of our achievements. They're going to be in a little bit of a different order as I was thinking about this. More than 99% of children whose care is paid through either federal or state dollars are in regulated programs in North Carolina, and that's probably very different from your model. But when we started this 20 years ago now, about 20% of our children who were getting subsidies were in regulated programs. So what we've proved and what we believed all along is that parents, they still have parent choice, but parents choose high quality if they have the choice and if it's accessible to them. So our theory really worked, and so the regulation actually forms the floor of our system. And then 73% of all children from low-income families now attend 4 or 5-star rated programs, and that's our 5-star. We have a 5-star system, and 5 is the highest rated program. And when we started, just to give you an example, less than 20%, even as late as 1995, less than 20% were in 4 and 5-star rated. So we've driven it hard, and it has worked. And then 94% of children with special needs who are supported by IDEA funding are in 4 and 5-star rated programs. So children with special needs were our partners from the beginning. They actually, the parent co-lead from every county of the programs around children with special needs was one of our convening partners. And so that's been important to have children in programs with their peers who are typically developing, and they're all in our highest rated, or almost all in our highest rated programs. And then 40% of our teachers of young children statewide have an associate's, a bachelor's, or higher degree, and an additional 40% of them are enrolled in degree-bearing programs. So we've still got a ways to go with education. That's a tough one, but we're on a path, and our Teach Scholarship program is part of the way we've been able to do that, that's linked to higher wages. And then North Carolina has the highest rates of early developmental screening of all states, and this was helped by a project called ABCD, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. All of our children with high needs are enrolled in medical homes through a network called Community Care of North Carolina. We knew that children at risk should not be served in emergency rooms, but should have a physician who is tracking their progress. And so we've been able to really achieve that goal with the help of our health partners at the state and local level. And then more than 80% of families that have participated in our parenting education programs have been able to increase their parenting skills in order to help their children be more successful. In addition, we've had more than 30 research studies, university-based research studies, about the benefit to young children of being in programs that are supported by Smart Start. And we've shown that children who arrive at school with Smart Start support have better math skills, better language skills, and fewer behavioral problems when compared to all other children. And then looking at some bigger indicators, our test scores at the end of 3rd grade as well as 5th grade have gone up gradually every year, and we've been the most improved in the nation for the past few years. And then our high school graduation rate is now better than 80%, and it was pretty sad when we started. So those of you in the room who I know have worked in this field for a long time know how hard it is to change population outcomes. And the way, you can appreciate the kind of complicated system we did in order to get these kinds of outcomes. So why did we choose a public-private model for doing this, or a vehicle? Because we started this in 1993, and at that time there weren't so many public-private partnerships around big issues like this. But the reason we did it is because we had huge challenges. So to mention a few, we had one of the largest populations of states where both parents were in the workforce, even in the early 90s. So about 70% of our families, both parents worked, and their kids were somewhere every day, and we were worried about some of the places they were. We had also the worse than any other state, child care standards and regulations. And I was so embarrassed about it and tried to have impact on it in other ways, like teacher by teacher and program by program. And it was such a big problem that we knew we had to do something different. We were low in the Children's Index of indicators of child well-being, and we were literally kicking children out of early education programs because they had challenging behaviors. So we needed big solutions, and that it would take everybody working on this to really change it. So that's why we decided to engage both the public and private sectors if we were going to change those statistics. So just so you know what I mean by public-private partnership, it's typically an agreement between a public agency and a private sector organization so that the skills and assets of each sector can be used in delivering a service, but also, besides sharing the resources, the risks and rewards potential in the delivery have to also be shared, and that's an important thing that we could talk some more about. Now, public-private partnerships have been in place for many years. The first ones I could find were before the Revolutionary War, when the Waterworks Company of Boston was the first private firm in the nation to provide drinking water to its citizens. So they figured it out a long time ago, and in early childhood we're kind of coming recently to it. But now leaders all over realize that it takes the capital and the intellectual resources of both sectors to make a difference. So what are some of the goals that can be achieved through this approach? The first one is to improve the quality of programming and settings where children spend their days in order to achieve better results. And this was literally our purpose in launching our work. So it was the major strategy of Smart Start, and it's also the major strategy of South Carolina's First Steps to School Readiness program. It is actually a state agency with a network of county partnerships that focuses on high-risk children. First Steps ensures that families find quality early learning services in both the public and private sectors, focuses on early intervention, home visitation, child care quality, and preschool and school transitions. And independent reviews of all their work shows that their strategies are working, and first grade retention, which was a huge problem in South Carolina, has dropped by 46% since they put First Steps in place. And they've leveraged 46 cents for every public dollar that's been allocated. And then another goal is to target programs to particular populations of children. In Oklahoma, Smart Start Oklahoma staffs their school readiness initiative and supports 18 local coalitions, it's almost statewide, that were established to implement the program and to support a statewide pre-K program. Both the state and the locals raise funds to support this work, with the private funding now at almost $9 million to support it. Another goal is to bring programs and services together in one place and to become the focal point for young children. So in Michigan, they created the Early Childhood Investment Corporation to be the focal point, the point at which early childhood information investment came together, focusing on school readiness, as most of these initiatives are. They were modeled after the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and their initiative was actually created through an interlocal agreement, which I found very interesting. But they leverage and invest public and private funds, and recently Governor Snyder consolidated all of their early learning initiatives and funding streams within the Department of Education based on the work and recommendations of the Investment Corporation. So everybody's eager to see how that's going to proceed in the future. And then a fourth goal is to bring together business, community, legislative, and education leaders for joint planning and fundraising to address the disparities and to support children to succeed. And so a good example of that is the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, which integrates both public and private funding to build capacity in communities. And the VECF is a state-level 501c3 nonprofit corporation that's governed by 35 business, community, legislative, and education members, along with ex officio members from government, from the cabinet. And since 2006, they've raised $30.1 million of private money and leveraged the state general fund investment of $6.8 million. So it's another example of how it can be done. So what have we learned in these sort of experiments over the years? Here are some factors that I think we've seen in the successful partnerships. We've learned that leadership matters, and I know that's news to no one in this room. It matters, and it matters a lot. We found that leadership can come from either the private or the public sector, and ideally should come from both. While in my state, visionary leadership came from a governor, the business sector also stepped up in ways we could have only imagined when we started talking about this work. So in those days, banks were big in North Carolina, and there were 7 banks that were located, the heads of the banks, what do you call it? Headquarters was located in North Carolina at that time. And every one of those 7 banks gave either $1 or $2 million to launch Smart Start. Now, it was not just their money that they provided. The most important thing they did was the heads of these banks went to the legislature and said, wait, this is your number one priority if we're going to build our workforce for the future. And so one of the heads of one of the banks in Charlotte actually worked with higher education and developed a report that said something like, Wachovia supports Smart Start. And he hand-delivered a copy of that to every single legislator and said to them, you've got to pay attention to this. This is what we need in North Carolina. So it's that kind of support. The report was much more important than the funding, although we love the funding. In other states, the visionary leadership has come really from the private sector. So in Arizona, as an example, Nadine and Eddie Basha, who own a chain of grocery stores there, led the effort to create a citizens ballot initiative and put Arizona's First Things First in place. And again last year, they led another campaign when the legislature tried to repurpose the First Things First tobacco money, and they successfully maintained First Things First, receiving 69% of the statewide popular vote from all political parties. So leadership matters, and it matters a lot. Another thing, Another thing that we've learned is that a formal structure is needed that includes active involvement from both the public and the private sectors. So the reason I talk about the structure is we've seen other smaller public-private partnerships sort of flourish for a few days or months and then kind of fall apart when there's not a structure at the state level that supports them. So I suggest that you consider that if you're thinking about, you have to think about what at the state level is going to support communities to be successful. And then I think it goes without saying that you have to begin with a clear vision and an action plan that everybody both understands and sees themselves as being part of. And I'm particularly talking about the communities when I say that. Accountability has to be built into the design of what you're doing. The work of having kids ready for school with special supports available to children who need it more is too important to take accountability for granted. So you need to set a high bar, and then support programs and services to be successful. And supporting a diverse delivery system that includes both public and private programs gives families the best choice for their young children, and was clearly a part of the success of our program in North Carolina. We knew we needed all the spaces that we had, but we needed all of them to be of high enough quality to meet the developmental needs of children. Learning happens where children are. It's not the sector, it's what happens there that makes the difference. Don't sell a public-private approach as only about private financing, and I can't say this enough, and recognize that the private sector is important for more than their money. Here's how it kind of breaks out nationwide if you look at resources for young children. 36% nationwide of the funding comes from government. 60%, you'll probably be surprised to learn, comes from families. And 4% actually comes from the private sector. Some people are surprised at that. And the private sector funding is so important for targeting for results, as well as leveraging other funding. But we can't leave it to the private sector to do all the work. We have to be partners. I often say to business leaders that having your financial contributions is important, but your influence is much more important for launching and keeping something like this moving forward. And then my last lesson learned, and I learned this in North Carolina, is you can get there from almost anywhere. So if you look at the states that have launched big statewide public-private partnerships, they're not necessarily the most well-resourced states in the nation, and they've often started from the bottom of the list of outcomes for kids. But each of them has used effective leadership, broad-based involvement of government and the private sector, shared goals, and shared accountability, and have been willing to work to achieve results. And now I want to just remind you very quickly why this matters. So why should we have early childhood partnerships? Why shouldn't we just keep having programs that look at some part of the population and get some results for some children? So the first reason is that the first years of life are a critical period of development and learning and can significantly impact a child's future ability to succeed in school. The brain is undergoing its most rapid rate of growth, and healthy, nurturing environments foster the solidifying of brain connections. Brains literally slough off what they don't use. So if children are exposed to rich language and physical activities and they're nurtured and cared for, that's what begins their success for school later on. I recently heard a researcher discussing how children learn to read, very specifically, and was reminded again that language, not anything else but language, is the most critical factor in a child learning to read.